The prairie doesn't forgive weakness. It doesn't have the patience for it. Out on the flatlands east of Medicine Hat, where the sky goes on so long it starts to feel like an accusation, the wind strips everything down to what it actually is, not what it pretends to be, not what it used to be, what it is right now in the cold and the dust and the long silence between one breath and the next. Callum Bryce had been living in that silence for 6 years. He was 43 years old, broad through the shoulders, slower than he used to be in ways that had nothing to do with his body. He ran a cattle operation on the edge of Cypress Hills country, the kind of place that looked like the land itself had decided not to bother with anything decorative. Dry grass, fence line, a creek that ran low in August and flooded every April without apology. He had 12 head of cattle, a border collie named Duff, and a reputation in Elkwater as a man who paid his debts, kept to himself, and had not, in recent memory, laughed at anything. There had been a woman, Eleanor. There had been plans. A bigger herd, a second barn, the sound of children running across the back porch in rubber boots. Eleanor had a laugh that could reach you from 3 fields away, and she used it often. And then the autumn she turned 31, the cancer came quickly and went slowly, and by March she was gone, and the porch had been quiet ever since. That was 6 years ago. The town had given him time to grieve, and then quietly concluded that Callum Bryce was the kind of man the grief had moved into permanently, the way a tenant stops paying rent but never quite leaves. He was mending the south gate on a Wednesday morning when the truck came down the road. It was an old half-ton, blue once, faded to the color of dishwater. It slowed at the cattle grid and stopped. The door opened. A woman climbed out, maybe 28 or so, with the careful way of moving that belongs to people who have learned not to take up too much space. She was Cree clearly, with dark hair pulled back and clothing that was clean but had been worn through a long journey. She carried a canvas bag over one shoulder and a rolled sleeping bag under one arm. And she was looking at Callum the way you look at a door you're not sure will open. He stayed where he was. Nobody came out this far without a reason, and reasons in his experience were almost always complicated. She stopped at the gate. "Your name is Callum Bryce," she said. "It wasn't a question. It is." "My grandmother knew your wife." "Eleanor," she continued, saying the name plainly, not as a weapon, and not as a comfort, just as a fact. They worked together at the Onion Lake School years ago, before either of us were part of the picture. He came to the gate. He did not open it. "What's your name?" "Nadia Swiftwind." She paused. "My grandmother was Dorothy Swiftwind. She passed in the spring, a beat. She left me a letter with your name in it," said Eleanor. "Always spoke well of you. Said if I ever found myself without a direction, you were the kind of man who understood what it meant to need one." Callum looked at the canvas bag, the sleeping bag, the careful eyes. Dorothy's granddaughter. Yes, he had met Dorothy twice. Once at Eleanor's school Christmas concert, once at the funeral. Both times she had pressed his hand and said almost nothing, which at the time he had appreciated more than he could explain. "What are you looking for?" he asked. She reached into the front pocket of the canvas bag and produced a folded envelope, old enough that the fold lines had gone soft. "I think it might be easier if you read this first," she said. He took it through the gate without opening it. "There's coffee on," he said after a moment. "You can come in while I read." She nodded once, and he opened the gate. The letter was written in a handwriting that moved across the page with the deliberate care of someone to whom writing had always been effortful but important. Dorothy's hand. He recognized it from the sympathy card she had sent after Eleanor died, a card he had kept in the kitchen drawer without entirely knowing why. "Callum, if Nadia has found you, then I am gone, and she is in the kind of situation I was not able to solve before I left. I want to tell you honestly what I am asking, because I do not believe in hiding the weight of a thing. My granddaughter is a remarkable person. She is also between worlds in the way that our people sometimes are. Too much of one thing for one place, not enough of another for somewhere else. She has a gift with horses that I have never seen in anyone, and a stubbornness that I gave her myself, and nowhere to put either of those things right now. I am not asking you to take her in like a charity case. She would not accept that and you would not offer it. I am asking you to give her work, honest work, fair wages, a season to find her footing. Eleanor told me once that you were the most decent man she knew, that you saw people clearly and did not flinch from what you saw. I believed her then. I believe her still. If you say no, Nadia will understand. She has been told to understand, in any case. But I hope you say yes. I think it might do you both some good. Dorothy Callum folded the letter. He looked across the kitchen at Nadia, who had accepted the coffee and was sitting with her back straight and her hands around the mug looking out the window at the south pasture with the attentive quiet of someone who knows how to wait. "She didn't tell you what was in it," he said. "She told me what it said. She didn't let me read it." Nadia turned from the window. "She thought you'd react better to her handwriting than to my summary." She was probably right. She usually was. Something crossed her face and went fast. "Are you going to tell me it's not a good time?" "It's never a good time," Callum said. "That's not a reason." He looked at the folded letter on the table. Outside, Duff barked once at something in the grass and went quiet again. "There's a room above the tack shed," he said. "Small, has a wood stove. You'd have to bank it yourself at night." He stood up. "Supper's at 6. I don't wait." She nodded. He walked to the door, then stopped. He didn't turn around. "One thing, Eleanor's name doesn't come up in passing, not as small talk, not to fill silence." A pause. "I just need you to know that before we start." He went out. Nadia sat with her coffee for a moment, looking at the letter still on the table. Dorothy's letter had not explained why, had not said, "This man is still carrying something so heavy it has changed the shape of him." But she understood it now, just from the way he'd said the name. Just from the single second before he got the door open, she understood it, and she didn't say a word about it. She drank the rest of her coffee and went to find the tack shed. The first 2 weeks were made of work and weather, and very little else. Nadia was up before Callum each morning, which he noticed and did not comment on. She assessed the horses with the focused silence of someone doing a calculation, learning each animal's particular anxieties. The bay gelding's reluctance to load, the roan mare who favored her left foreleg slightly on cold mornings. By the end of the first week, she had the roan moving evenly again, something Callum had been meaning to address for 2 months and had not gotten to. She didn't ask permission to start things. She also didn't start things without watching first. There was a difference between those two qualities, and Callum had spent enough years with people who confused them to recognize it clearly. They built a working rhythm out of necessity. He told her what needed doing. She told him how she planned to do it. They did not, for the most part, discuss anything beyond the land and the animals, and the practical requirements of keeping both functional. On the 12th day, the gray gelding, a new addition, barely halter broke, that Callum had bought at an auction in Irvine and immediately regretted, got loose from the paddock during a windstorm and ended up tangled in the old wire along the creek bank. By the time Callum reached it, Nadia was already there, kneeling in the cold mud, talking to the animal in a low, steady voice that didn't waver, even as the wind threw grit sideways across the flats. He watched her work the wire loose without jerking, without startling the horse, without once losing the even quiet of her voice, and the animal, which had been shaking badly when he arrived, went gradually still under her hands. It took 20 minutes. Afterward, walking the gray back to the paddock in the fading afternoon, Callum said, "Where'd you learn that?" "My grandmother's cousin had a place near Meadow Lake," Nadia said. "Mustangs." He said the trick wasn't making them trust you. It was making them forget to be afraid. There's a difference. A big one. He thought about that for the rest of the evening, in a way he didn't examine too closely. There is a moment in almost every story like this one, and I want you to notice it when it comes, where the two people stop being strangers and become something that doesn't have a clean name yet. It's never a dramatic moment. It's always something small. For Callum and Nadia, it was a fire. He'd built one in the stone ring south of the house, the way he sometimes did when the sky was clear and he didn't want to be inside. He'd been sitting with it for an hour, not thinking about anything in particular, which was the closest he came to peace when he heard her cross the yard. She didn't ask if she could sit. She sat on the far side of the fire and looked up at the sky the way someone does when they learn to read it young and still find it worth reading. After a long time, she said, "My grandmother used to say the northern lights were the old people playing ball." You believe that? I believe she believed it. Nadia was quiet for a moment. I believe things she believed have a way of holding up. Callum looked up. The Milky Way was out, which it always was this far from town, which he had stopped noticing years ago. Tonight, for the first time in a while, he noticed. "She talked about you," Nadia said. "Dorothy." She said Eleanor wrote to her about you years back. Said you were the kind of man who fixed things right instead of just getting them to hold for the season. A pause. She meant it as a compliment. I know. She was right, wasn't she? It wasn't quite a question. He looked across the fire at her. She was watching him with the frank attention of someone who is trying to understand something, not trying to impress anyone, and the difference was so obvious and so rare that it took him a moment to recognize it. "Where will you go?" he asked. "After the season." She was quiet for a while. "I don't know yet. I had a plan before Dorothy got sick. After that, the plan got quiet." She looked at the fire. "I think I'm looking for something that feels like it's supposed to be mine. I haven't found it yet. I thought maybe I'd know it when I saw it." Callum said nothing. But something shifted in the region of his chest, the way ice shifts in a river when the temperature changes by 1 degree. Nothing visible. Everything different underneath. He didn't say goodnight when he went in. He never did. But that night he stayed by the fire 20 minutes longer than he needed to, which was, for him, a significant thing. They rode into Elkwater on the first Saturday of November for feed and supplies. Callum had been dreading it in the specific way of someone who knows exactly what a small town looks like when it is deciding what it thinks of something. He felt the attention as they tied up outside the co-op. Not hostile, mostly, but the careful sideways kind that small places excel at. Inside, a woman named Janet Perdue, who ran the post office counter, gave Nadia a look that was entirely neutral in a way that required effort to maintain. Callum noticed. Nadia noticed. Neither of them acknowledged it. Coming out, a man called Gordon Spears. No. A man called Hector Drummond, large, slow to move, quick to believe in his own authority, stepped off the sidewalk into their path. "Bryce," he said. Then his eyes went to Nadia. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. The silence did the work for him, and it was not a friendly silence. Callum stopped. He had known Hector Drummond for 15 years. He had helped him pull a truck out of a ditch once. He had never particularly liked him. "She's my ranch hand," Callum said, with the flatness of a man who has already had the conversation inside his head and is simply reporting the conclusion. "Best I've had. You want to move, or are we going to stand here?" Hector looked at him for a long moment, recalibrating something. Then he stepped back, not gracefully, but he stepped back. They loaded the truck without speaking to anyone else. On the road home, the silence was different from the silences before it. Warmer, more complicated. "You didn't have to do that," Nadia said. "I know. Why did you?" Callum watched the road. The light was going gold over the hills to the west. The particular gold that only happens in November in Alberta, that makes the dead grass look briefly like something valuable. "Because it was accurate," he said, "and because some things need saying in front of people." She looked at him for a moment, then looked back at the road. And if something settled in her chest just then, she kept it to herself. On a Sunday afternoon in the 7th week, Callum went to the tack shed to return a halter and found the door open and Nadia not there, but her canvas bag on the cot, open and spread across the small table beside the wood stove. Drawings. He hadn't meant to look, he looked. Horses, mostly. Done in pencil and charcoal with a precision that went beyond technique into something more like love. The gray gelding, mid-motion, every muscle caught exactly. The roan at the water trough, head down, reflected. A hawk over the creek in the particular angle of a hawk riding thermals, not hunting, just using the air the way air is meant to be used. And then, the ranch. His fence line, the one she'd repaired in the third week. The south barn, the stone ring, the well with the cottonwood beside it. She had drawn his land the way someone draws something they are paying attention to. Not recording it, attending to it. She was in the doorway when he looked up. He waited for her to be embarrassed. She wasn't. "Dorothy taught me," she said. "She said if you can draw something properly, you have to slow down enough to see it." She said most people skip the seeing part. Callum picked up the drawing of the south fence line. He looked at it for a long time. She had caught the way the posts leaned slightly east, the way the wire went taut at the turn. She had seen the thing he passed every day and stopped registering. "You've been paying attention," he said. "That's the job," she said. "The horses need you to pay attention. The land needs it too." She paused. "You stopped seeing this place." He set the drawing down, not carelessly. "Could you draw me something?" he said. "Anything you choose." She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her pencil. "I already know what it'll be," she said. 4 days later, she left an envelope outside his kitchen door. Inside was a drawing of the stone fire ring, unlit in morning light, with frost on the rocks. But the way she had done it, the angle, the shadows, it looked less like a fire ring and more like something waiting. And in the frost on one of the near stones, if you looked closely, were 2 sets of boot prints approaching from opposite sides. That evening, she wasn't at supper. He found her outside, sitting on the fence along the east pasture, her face doing something she hadn't finished doing yet. "Nadia." She looked up. "I need to tell you something I should have said before now." Her voice was steady, which meant she had been working on the steadiness. "There's a man named Aldous Crane who holds the adjacent quarter section east of here. He has it on record that I am an unattached Cree woman without a fixed address or documented employment, and he has filed a claim with the county that could result in me being classified as a transient and moved on." She said it without drama, which made it considerably worse. "The filing window closes at the end of December. Dorothy didn't know about it before she died, and I didn't tell you when I arrived because I didn't want you to feel like you had to be here," Callum said. "Yes." He was quiet for a long time. The stars were coming out over the hills, one at a time, the way they did out here where there was nothing to stop them. "Why didn't Dorothy put it in the letter?" Nadia looked at her hands. "Because she wanted you to want me here, not to keep me here because you felt obligated." She paused. She was very particular about the difference. "Here is what I keep coming back to every time I think about this story. Dorothy Swiftwind wrote that letter knowing she would not live to see whether it worked. She chose the people in it carefully, and she trusted them to rise. That kind of faith, in people you will not see again, is one of the rarest things in the world." Callum looked at the drawing he'd been carrying in his coat pocket since he found it. The fire ring, the 2 sets of tracks. He didn't put it away. He didn't sleep well that night, and he didn't pretend to. He lay in the dark with the window showing stars and worked through it the way he worked through everything, methodically, without flinching, until he got to the part he'd been avoiding. He was not ready for her to leave. It wasn't gratitude, though that was present. It wasn't obligation, though Dorothy had started it. It was something that had grown in the daily work of the place, in the fire and the horses and the careful way she saw things. Something he recognized, distantly, like a word in a language he used to speak. He was afraid of it. He was afraid of it in the specific way you're afraid of something you want badly, which is the worst kind of afraid. In the morning, he drove to the county office in Medicine Hat. He asked about Crane's filing. The clerk confirmed it, then added, quietly, in the way of clerks who have working consciences, that the filing could be successfully contested if the woman in question was formally and documentably employed on a recognized agricultural property. "What kind of documentation?" Callum asked. "Employment contract," the clerk said, "or a marriage record." Callum drove home the long way, through the hills with the heater going and the radio off, letting the horse, the truck, find its own pace. By the time he reached the gate, he knew what he was going to do. Not because of Crane, not because of the county records, Because he had spent 6 years being a man who had stopped wanting things. And he was done. He found her at the Gray's paddock, running her hand along the animal's neck, the way she did when she was thinking about something other than the horse. Nadia. She turned. He had not prepared a speech. He had never been a man who prepared speeches, and starting now seemed dishonest. "I don't want you to leave," he said. "Not at the end of the season. Not in December. Not in the spring." He looked at his hands, then back at her. "I want you to stay because I want you here. Not because of Dorothy, though she had better instincts than either of us. Not because of Crane and his filing lot, because this place has been something I was just maintaining for 6 years, and since you came, it's been something I'm actually running again. Because you see this land in a way I stopped seeing it, and I don't want to stop seeing it again." He stopped. "I'm not easy to live with. I'm quiet, and I have bad habits, and I've spent 6 years building walls I don't entirely know how to take down, but I can promise you I'll try. And I think you already know I keep my promises." She looked at him for a long moment with the same attentiveness she brought to the horses, finding the true thing beneath the surface. "I told myself this wouldn't happen," she said. "So did I. I came here for one season. Work and wages." She looked at the Gray, who had his nose over the fence toward her shoulder. "I didn't plan for it to look like this, neither did I. I don't know what I am to you," she said carefully. "I'm not. I don't have a word for it." "I don't either," he said. "But I think maybe the word isn't the first thing. I think maybe it's the second." She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that a cloud moved across the sun and the light changed and changed back. "My grandmother knew," she said softly. "She knew this was how it would go. Stubborn woman. Yes." Something moved across her face. "I come by it honestly. I know. And I think." She stopped. She took a breath the way a person takes a breath before they step off a ledge they've been standing at the edge of for a while. "I think yes." They drove to Medicine Hat 6 weeks later and made it official in the courthouse on a Thursday morning, with the clerk as witness and Duff waiting in the truck. Small towns being what they are, Janet Perdue at the co-op had heard about it by Friday afternoon and had, it turned out, been privately hoping for it since the day Callum told Hector Drummond to move. Small towns, remember, they just take their time saying so. The ranch changed after. Not dramatically, but the gray gelding was calm and well handled by spring. The south barn got a new roof, done right, not just patched. A garden appeared along the east wall of the house in May, planted in rows so precise they looked like a drawing of a garden rather than an actual one. The silence that had filled every room was replaced, gradually, by the ordinary sounds of two people who had each brought particular skills to an arrangement that kept surprising them. In June, she told him at the stone fire ring. She said it simply, the way she said everything that mattered. He stood very still for a long moment, looking at the fire, at the frost photograph she'd given him that he'd had framed and put on the kitchen wall, at his own hands. Then he crossed the ring and held her, not dramatically, without words. The way a person holds something they had quietly, stubbornly, against all evidence, never completely stopped hoping for. In the long gold evening on that particular piece of Alberta, with the hills going dark in the east and the first stars coming out overhead, Callum Bryce finally came home. Not to the house, not to the land, to the life he'd been keeping the door open for, without quite knowing it, all along, and somewhere in the deep particular place where a grandmother's love outlasts her body. Dorothy Swiftwind smiled and was satisfied,